Today we're making a bare book page journal. That's a journal that has a book page for its front. It's strong enough to work as a cover due to 3 special features, and I'll specifically demonstrate each of these with you today. It also looks really stunning, and yet it's so quick and easy. And of course I have the free process steps here, which you can find along with over 60 others over on Pinterest. The first thing you want to do is choose a double book page, or in fact probably several, because once you get started making these you are not going to want to stop. And I'm showing you several books here today because I wanted to show you and definitely prove to myself that this works with lots of different types of books and different book pages. Now, I've made lots of junk journals in the past with this book, A Victorian Flower Album by Henry Terry, and I've gone through several of these, and many of them, particularly the first one I bought, had thick book pages. So this is beautiful and thick, and it's thick enough to work as a cover. Okay, it's not cardboard, but it is great. But when I bought a few of them online, obviously you don't get to feel them, do you, when you're buying online? Some of them look like this, and I'm going to give you a secret in a minute to knowing which one to buy. They all look the same. So this has got much thinner pages. It's not copy paper, but I don't know how thick it is in GSM, but it's not a lot more. And I have a couple of these and I wanted to do something with them. So today's journal is definitely doable with thinner pieces of paper. And the secret that I have found, certainly with the versions that I've bought, is that this text here, can you see it's green? It's actually like a foil green. Whereas the one with thicker paper is actually black. And with the number of books I've gone through, that's always been the case. So don't tell anybody. If you want the thick paper, it seems to be, as far as I can tell, and let me know if you know any different, black font on the front for thick paper and this foil green for the thinner. But as I say, do let me know if you found anything different. So I've used these to make several, and I'll be honest, I've got better as I've made these. So I've made quite a few. I got faster and faster, and I learnt how to make those 3 techniques, those 3 features really work for me. I made it with this wildflower book. So I took pages out of here, doubles again, and they work for the cover because of the things we're going to do to bolster it. I thought I'd try it with a smaller book, and I thought I'd go for something other than flowers. So I've got a book, RSP Guide to British Birds, bought it in a charity shop. And if you can see, maybe these images would be too small for many projects, but when you pull out a double page, they work brilliantly, and I think that's super stunning. And then the last one, I used a book, Wildflowers of Britain, which I got lots of pages out of. I've got several more due to sew up, and it works with that one too. I just want to tell you one more thing about when you pull out your pages to give you the best chance of this working. I've got lots here ready to use. I've even got a few blank pages. When I say blank, I mean they don't have a picture on the front. Just move those to the side. When I extracted, there's the blanks, they will get used within the journal, so don't throw those away. When I extracted some of the pages, I did my best, because it's sewn, to cut these with a knife so that these could be pulled out really easily. But the sides of this book are also attached with a little bit of glue to the spine. And it may be that you don't always get a good enough deconstruction. So just to let you know, this is the sort of double book page that I wouldn't use as the outer cover, because that line down there where they're attached is not strong enough. You want the double page to be as intact as possible, because we do want to give this the best chance possible. See, that one has come out with almost nothing other than the little marks, the little holes where the string came through or the thread came through. So that's just a tip when you're extracting your double pages. So now that we've got our pages, we want to make the belt that goes around these, and we're going to do that to the right size to fit the page that we've chosen. So it's important that we do this in the right order. So we're going to make a belt like this, which in this case I've covered with some really old music paper, which is why it's this gorgeous deep coffee colour. You can also cover some card with just a book page, and that's what I've done with this one, just to show that you can do it with anything. So choose a piece of cardstock. Ideally, if you want to make several of these, choose a piece of maybe 12 by 12 that's either plain or some cardstock that you don't particularly like anymore. And we're going to cover one side. So I would choose the side that doesn't have the beautiful grain. There's a beautiful grain on this. So I would cover this side, and that makes the cardstock thicker, but I think it's also really nice to have something with a bit of a vintage feel. You could choose cardstock that does resonate with any of the image that you've already chosen, another reason for choosing your book page first. So I thought that either this gorgeous pale orangey brown or the blue would work. So if I used book page, I would probably prefer to use something that in its own right looks quite old. So I've been using this, I think it's a Pickwick Papers book, and it's absolutely falling to bits, as you can see. And it's one of those where, just be careful as I tear out, the pages are not even aligned to the right. It's so old, it's that sort of type. It's one of those where every now and again you get a gorgeous image. I mean, look at that. So I'd just preserve that and put that on the side for another project. We'll do something with all of these in another video, and I'd take all of these out and then get going at covering the card. Now, I won't spend ages covering the card today, but I do have a few key tips to share. I have found a little bit of a technique when it comes to using glue to get this on. For speed, I would cover the whole thing. This is a light PVA glue, not desperately watery, but not too bad. And I'd go over the whole thing with my glue, get quite a lot on. And it dries really quickly, this stuff. So I would, either with my finger or a little card, spread that out a bit. And I can see it's drying already. Make sure it goes as far to the edge as possible, and that will help. And then, because it is drying, get my papers down and go, if I can, tidily up to the edge of the card. And as I do with my collage, I would do my under-over technique. So get the next piece to go underneath this one. And I do that so that I don't get a big expanse of plain book page. Now, I found that when I experimented with this and made up a few samples, one layer maybe wasn't quite enough. And obviously you can see I've got part of a book page size left here. But that's okay, I would just get another page on here and then tear off the excess. That needs readjusting in its position. And then go round the back, fold it over and tear that off. And because, as I said, maybe one layer isn't quite enough, in fact you can see a little bit of the dark card behind, I'd go over with any of my little pieces and put those on it. And I really like the overlap and the juxtaposition of the tiny pieces and the offcuts all overlapping each other. In fact, I've actually got a piece on the side here running vertically. Obviously this text is all horizontal, so I think it actually adds to it to be able to go on top of this whole piece. And also I found that when I go on top, it helps a little bit to move to a dry stick, or a stick that's got less liquid in the glue than the PVA that we've just used, because I don't think this works as well if the paper is just a little bit too damp. It starts to ripple, whereas if you use as the second layer a glue stick, you get a nice flat finish. And all you want to do is go over your 12 by 12 or a large piece of cardstock so that you've got something like this. And this is a bit of a tessellation of pieces on the side, up right here, vertical. Nice little mixture. And that's going to be beautiful when we cut it up and make the belt. This is the one I did earlier on with that old piece of music paper, and I have bolstered it again. It's less see-through, and I think I only did one layer on some of this. The challenge with pieces of paper that are really old like this is they can crack, and you might have seen on some of the samples I've added a piece of washi tape. So I'll talk about this again, but if you do have paper that cracks, we can deal with that. We can add a bit of washi in the right place at the right time. And in fact, mine cracked, I carried on, and I got to a solution that I think really works. So at this stage, we have our basis for the belt, and what we're going to do is cut it down to size and get it in a ship shape to work as a belt on our journal. So if you have the patience, your cardstock that's been collaged will have dried, and you can cut out your belt, which needs to be a specific height and width. And regardless of the size of the book page that you've chosen, I recommend that your belt is about 3 inches in height. So 3 inches for this one that's made with the smaller bird book page, and 3 inches with this one in height, even though this is a larger and slightly different shaped book page behind. And you want the width of the belt to sit 1.5 centimetres beyond the width of your book page, which means that obviously your piece of cardstock that you cut out of your collage piece needs to be 3 centimetres wider than the double of your book page. So I'll just say that again, 1.5 centimetres extension beyond, double it. You want your total strip, your total belt to be 3 centimetres longer than your book page when you open it out. And you just want to fold it in half. If you need to add washi tape at this stage, do so. And then if you want to round the corners, I'm pretty indifferent between a rounded corner or a square one. And I do round a lot of corners, but I actually think I quite like it like that with it square. And if you can sew around it, you could use faux stitching. I think sewing is better, and I'm going to say that the sewing should be fairly close to the edge of the belt, because that will make it easier to get the eyelets into the right place when we add them. So that's all there is to creating the belt. You can see on this one, I've actually been using up some of my 12 by 12 cardstock that's been sitting on the shelf, so it's a great opportunity to use up some of that cardstock. What have we got on the back of these? I don't think I'd use that for anything else, but when I come to use it for some of these journals, because it's a contrast to the vintage style paper on the front and the really pretty book page, I think it works. Yeah, I've got it on here. I just really like it. It's modern and I like contrast. So it's easy to use up some of your other papers that aren't really getting much love. The eyelets, let's do an eyelet. So take those away. The eyelets need to be in a specific place, and that is 1.5 centimetres in from either of the top and bottom, and 1 centimetre in from the far end of each belt. So I would just put a dot in pencil on my belt. Make sure I can see it when I put the dot on. I do it with a crocodile. You could do it with any hole punch. Let me do this properly this time. Get my, I've got my measurement on the right there, using the crocodile to do this. Make a hole, make a hole. I'd do the same on the other end, and then I just take my eyelets. I like to use these that are, I've got a bag of rose gold, gold and silver. They came from Amazon. I think I showed them in last week's video, which was about making jewellery for journals. It came in useful then. and I get this the right way round, just squish that down, and you'll end up with your belts that are ready to put around your journal. Really easy but quite strong, and this is a key feature in making this bare book page journal fit for purpose without necessarily having a hard cover. The next thing we're going to do is put together the signature, so the pages that go inside this little journal, and it's only one signature, so it is super quick and easy, and it's the way in which we put this signature together that means it qualifies as a second feature for helping this bare book page journal really work. So specifically, it's the nature of the papers, the size, the folding and the positioning, which all together helps to make it strong enough to act as a cover. So I've got one here. I won't spend all our time cutting papers up, but I wanted to be really clear on what I mean by that. So here's an example from one of those flower books. I have taken a double page, and immediately behind that double page I've got a piece of, not desperately thick, but nicely coloured, goes with the colours on the front, but it's strong paper. It's actually, I would say, pretty much cardstock, and you want this second piece to be almost as large as the front cover, but you want it to be cardstock, and what that does is give a lot of robustness to that front page, so it displaces any of the pressure, any of the thumbs that are pushed in. You've immediately got some resistance behind. You also want the next two pages at least to be of a size that's almost as big as this front page. So what you're doing, you've got the strength of the card, and then you've got a couple of pieces that are helping provide resistance at these pointy corners, which get a little bit of that tatty look, or get a little bit of extra attention when the journal's being picked up and used. If you have any pages that are, or any papers that are going in this that are not the right size, then it's better to have an asymmetric piece. Let's just show you. So let's say I was putting this lined piece of paper in. Rather than fold it in half and none of the corners come up here to the edge, I would fold it so that at least one of the sides is as big, or almost as big, as the exterior book page. So the folding matters too. You want to have ideally several pages more that are almost as big as the front cover, and if you can, add some other thicker papers too. So I've tried to stick with a bit of a colour theme here. I've got these oranges and yellows coming out, so colour doesn't obviously make it stronger, but I think it's nice. And I've got another piece of cardstock here, which, although it's a lot smaller than this one at the front, it does still help add robustness. And when it comes to the size of this one at the front, it's probably the most important element within the signature. You want this to be at least 14 centimetres high. And the reason I'm saying that is because we want, when we put the belt on for the stitching and where we put the holes, to be within this piece of cardstock. So we want the holes that go through some of this exterior page to really bite into the cardstock so it's got a grip. If you had just that narrow piece, it's not enough. It's not 14 centimetres high. You'd only have a couple of holes in here, and the rest would be in the rest of the pages. We're going to do a specific style of stitching on the spine that gives the opportunity for 3 holes to go into this cardstock at the front, and that really helps make this strong as well. If any of your papers are bigger than anything you need, so in this one I've got my cardstock at the front, I've got some really nice bright scrapbook paper, so this page was bigger than I needed. Don't tear or cut that down. Fold it over, because every time you can fold over at that edge, you get a bit more strength. I've got some beautiful papers in here, So have any of the others been folded? Maybe, oh, towards the back I've got scrapbook paper. In fact, on this one I've folded it over and made it into a pocket. There's a bit more fold on the music paper. Every time we're doing that, we're making this edge of the papers a bit stronger, and then that all helps with the strength supporting the outer cover. I wanted to make a comment as well about some of the papers I've got in here. I think this is a really pretty image, and it's a digital, or sometimes called a printable. Now on my channel I love using book pages. I like using and upcycling any sorts of papery scraps. Occasionally I like a strong feature, and I dip into one or two printables that I have and add them to my journals. So this one is from Tracie Fox. Her shop on Etsy is called LoveJunkJournals, and I think there's real impact in having, in a page that's near the front of your journal, a face or another bold image. So I thought I would share that. I'm not under any obligation to show any digitals. I don't make digitals myself. I wouldn't know how. It's not my bag, and I don't have any remuneration. There's no incentive for me to promote digitals or not. I just choose to use what I want. And that's what this is about, isn't it? Do what works for you. So for example, I've got vintage music paper here, lined, thick cardstock, well, thin cardstock, thick paper, children's book page, white and glossy, bit of scrapbook paper, as I say, just a little bit of cardstock. And this is one of the pages from the same book as the cover, but I've just trimmed it down a little bit so that there's no risk of it jutting out when it gets sewn in. So those are the key features of the signature. What we're going to do is a really special third feature of sewing on the belt and giving the spine this lovely twisted effect, which gives it extra strength. And then I'll show you right at the end how I have finally learnt to tie the ribbon in a way that makes it look a lot nicer and makes it work a lot more neatly every time. So it's time to sew the whole lot together, and to do that we're going to use a 5-hole pamphlet stitch down this spine, but we're going to add something different, which is we're going to add a bit of a twist. And this is the third feature that makes this spine just a little bit stronger. And to do that, I'm going to use string and a needle, and I'm going to poke the holes with my pokey tool. And I need a different length than what I'd usually cut when I make my journals. When I make a journal normally, I would measure out, let's just do it, I would measure out 3 and a bit of these. So I would go 1, 2, 3, and 1 for the pot, and cut there. For this one, because we're going to make a twisted spine which gives this extra strength, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and even just for confidence a little bit more, and that gives me this length, quite a lot. And you really want to be generous when you are measuring out your string or whatever you want to use to bind your journal, because you don't want to be left right at the end without enough to do the twisted spine. I've added a little dangle on this one, and I put some beads onto another, and you can add those very easily. This is after we've done the twisting, and these beads get added as you're making the spine up. I wanted to show you how to do this without any of the beads getting in the way, because I think that's really important to know how to do the twisted spine, and then you can easily add the beads. Make sure they're neatly tucked in, and most importantly, this piece of cardstock, I want it to be in the middle at the front so that it catches when we put, I'm going to put 5 holes in the whole of the spine. I'm going to start with putting holes into the belt. Now I know that this was 3 inches in height, so at the 1.5 inch mark, I'm going to mix between inches and centimetres, I do apologise. I'm going to put a mark at 1.5 inches, and then I want another mark 3 centimetres above which will bring it to just inside where you've sewn if you've sewn it, and 3 centimetres below. So it's 3 centimetres between 3 dots, and I'll use my pokey tool just to make those holes. And then I want 5 holes in the spine. So I'll find the middle, make my marks and put holes through with my pokey tool. 5 holes, so it's about 18 centimetres. Mark at 9, 3 centimetres above and below to match the belt, and 3 centimetres above and below each of those to give me 5 holes. There we go. Pokey tool to go through those. 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, and when we come to put it all together, I have found that it's easy because you've got a belt and the journal to get into a bit of a mess. So bear with me as I try to do this on camera, and don't laugh. Right, I'm going to start with the top hole going from the outside in and bring that through. So I want to go back through the second hole, and it's at this point I want to pick up the belt, and I'm also going to move my string to be roughly in the right place. So by that I mean I want a couple of books worth of length sitting on the outside. What I'm basically going to do is make sure I've got enough string to do the twisted spine. I'm going to pull a bit more through. And I need about 2 books worth, 2 heights worth. 2 heights worth. Got the right amount of string sitting outside, which means I've got about 3 books worth on the needle. Let's get the belt on, make sure it's the right way up. I'm just going to say, when I made one of my samples and I was practicing, I got my belt upside down, so that's a tip of something not to do. So we come from the inside to the out, and we get the needle to go from the outside in. And then we're going to go from the outside of the book page and the signature through the middle hole. Through we go. Bring it through, back out, and pick up your belt. It starts to come together through the 5th. Keep it on my desk just to hold it all together. I've still got about 2 lengths worth here, which gives me plenty of length on this one. As you come back, one thing to be careful of is to try to not split your string. When you go through the hole, try to not let your needle go through the string or whatever you're using as thread. Now, string's obviously a bit thicker than some of the threads, so I have to be more careful. So I'm going to go through that one. I've gone through the belt. I'm going to go back through the outer hole in the middle of the belt. Try not to split my string. And the reason I'm saying try not to split your string is if you haven't got this piece long enough and your other piece long enough, so you haven't got the proportions that remain right, it's harder to pull the string through if you've split your string and got one piece going through another. I hope that makes sense. Ideally you will have positioned your string in the right place on the way, but if you haven't, it is harder to move it and adjust it if you've caught your string and pushed your needle through it. Let's just get that one through. So we're doing basically a 5-hole pamphlet stitch to start with, and then we're going to bolster that spine and the sewing we've done with a little bit of twisting, a little bit of a spiral. So I've come out, that's quite firm. All I want to do now is tie it off at the top. I keep my needle on and try to make the knot right at the top here on that first hole. So I found when I made these that at this stage, although I had a belt and the papers, which I thought were helping, it just wasn't firm enough. So what we're going to do is add a twist so that it looks like this, and that adds firmness because you don't have this slack capacity able to pull away, which meant that the papers would be looser. What we're going to do is go down each of these 4 parts of the spine to start with, and going in the same direction, just put your needle through and make a bit of a spiral. Now you can do it 2 or 3 times. We're going to go all the way down and come up, so don't worry if there's still some slackness. I've put 3 through that one, it felt a bit looser. Going into the next part of the spine, I've done 2 on that one, we'll see if that works. You'll get a feel for this if you do a few as to how tight you're getting your spine to be. I'm going to do 1, maybe I'll do 3 on this one, 2, 3, just adjust it, spread it out, and then I'm down on my 4th one, 1, 2, and at this stage what I want to do is tie a knot at the bottom and then work back up. So I find the easiest way to do that, pull your string over to one side, so I'm holding it with my hand here, and bring your needle through so that you're creating a knot, and just pull gently so that the knot forms right at the bottom of that spine. So you've now got some twist, but it's also attached right at the bottom, and that will spread out that tension so that you've got that grip all the way down. And now what we're going to do is work all the way up in the same way. And if you wanted to add beads, just add beads when you get to the various section where you want to add a bead. Just put your needle through one of the beads that you've got and then carry on, and it will hold it in place. I decided that at the end of this I actually preferred it with just a dangly element here, which is easier to add, and you don't need to add that as you're doing the spine. So let's go all the way back. So I'm going to push my needle through, push my needle through, do a couple in that bottom section of the spine. That feels better already. I think I might move to the next section, and the length of string that I gave you should be enough to do 2 or 3 loops in each of your 4 sections of spine. Might do 3 in that one. I'm going from underneath towards me, and that will make the rotation, the turn of the string, be in the same direction as the turn, the spiral that we had on the way down, which I find is a bit prettier than going against it. From underneath towards me. So remember, if you wanted to add a bead, you can do it as you work up at any of those sections. Maybe do one last one, and it will tighten it up. You're filling in the space and you're making it stronger. And I'm just going to tie that off at the top. And I think string looks really nice as well. So I can tie that in a bow, double knot there at the top, just trim that off. So the final element is a nice ribbon on the side. So obviously you can choose a colour that goes with the image, or really just anything you have. I really like this bold one with the stitches in it, and it contrasts beautifully with the green. So I've got this little roll. I thought I'd use this stripy one. I found you want to be about 40 centimetres, maybe just a bit over. I'll go to about, let's go to about 23. I'll do that twice. So you want 23 twice, and that will give you plenty for tying your ribbon, tying your little bow. I'll give it a nice slant at the end. I think that makes it look pretty when it's tied. And I'll just show you how I tie the bow in a way that Makes it a little bit more, well, pretty presentationally when it all comes together. So tie your bow, tie your knot to start with, and give yourself your first loop, and then bring this piece over. Rather than going, naturally I'd go round, bring your piece over and push that through. And for some reason, don't ask me why, the bow will look a lot more like the ones that you see on Instagram from all those very clever people who wrap presents. And here we have our journal all ready to add a dangle. And to finish it off, I've picked a beautiful dangle from the collection that I made last week. Check out my video if you want to see the journey of making those. And I just hook that underneath the top knot, push that through, close the bulb pin, and then turn it round so that the bead and all the little bits just drop to the bottom. That's it. And here we have our bare book page journal with 3 key features to make it strong, it's stunning, and it's easy.